Welcome to Sakshi TV special immigration show. I'm your host Shivani Raj. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 4 immigration shows every week. On Tuesdays with lawyer Srinivas Kaveti, on Wednesdays with Prashanthi Reddy in English, on Thursdays with Mr. Chand Parvatneni, and on Fridays with Banu and Indra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on the show is not a legal advice and for general informational purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for the use of information. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our shows, you can definitely contact us. Before we begin the show, also note that the information provided on this show is not a legal advice and for general informational purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible. Without any further delay, let's welcome Reddy Garu on our show. Mr. Reddy, welcome back. How are you feeling?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you, Shivani. Hope you're well.
Yes, I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Prashanthi Reddy Garu. Before we get onto this topic, Ms. Prashanthi, can we know, are there any immigration updates recently?
We will start with the FDNS site visit topic.
Yeah, sure. No issues. Last week we did have a kind of introductory, show about the FDNS, but let's get deep into it. First of all, Ms. Reddy, can you just give a recap about what exactly is an FDNS visit so that we can get onto the topic?
Sure. So, a lot of people are filing H1s now because of the H1B cap registration that has been completed in March, and so H1B cap filings have started in April. They will continue until June. That's June 30th is the last day to file your H1s. So now that many of you have filed H1B approvals, or maybe in the process of filing, or maybe the H1B is pending with USCIS, what can you expect next? One of the possible outcomes of this scenario is an FDNS site visit. An FDNS site visit can take place either after the approval, mostly after the approval of the petition, and sometimes while the petition is pending as well. So the FDNS site visit is basically it's the fraud detection unit, and any benefit will have when you're asking for a benefit, you're also allowing USCIS to conduct audits or site visits or ask for more information, etc. So you have to be always ready for that. So these FDNS officers, previously they used to be contractors, federal contractors, but now FDNS officers are actually USCIS officers. So they've stopped using federal contractors anymore. So there we are talking to basically, we are dealing with USCIS officers right now. So the first question, I guess, is what do we need to know? What the FDNS officer is going to ask at the time of the site visit. What is the task of the immigration officer? Why do they conduct these FDNS site visits? So the immigration officer basically verifies information with reference to your H1B petition. They usually have a copy of the H1B petition with them. So they look at the entire I-129 petition and all the supporting documents, including any documents that you might have submitted to show that you have employment for the person, especially if you are a consulting company, an IT consulting company, or some other type of consulting company. They might be looking at the supporting documentation that you have submitted, such as the end client letter, the vendor letter, purchase order, etc., etc. They will verify that your organization actually exists. They will review all the information that they can find on your company. They will look at the public records of your information, such as the Deloitte & Touche website, DNT. So basically, Deloitte & Touche maintains a public website of all the companies that exist. and companies usually register on that website, and USCIS follows that. It's also called VIBE, VIBE. VIBE website basically derives its information from that database. So they look at that, they look at your online presence, they look at social media. They also, as a way of gathering information, as I said, they would also do site visits. Those could be announced or unannounced, or they could simply ask in an email for information, or if they are not, if that officer is not in the same city as where you are located. Because sometimes the work site is in a different city, so the officer might be from that city. So maybe they will send you an email instead of visiting, or they will make a phone call, right? On a visit, once they come, if they do come for a site visit, what will they do at your office? They'll most probably take photographs of the premises to document the fact that you have an office, you have a workplace, workstation, say for the beneficiary, if you say that the beneficiary is working at your office. They will review the documents on site. There are some documents that you need to maintain on site, such as the public access file. The H1B public access file, in which you basically have on your premises a copy of the H1B petition of the person that you filed the H1 for, and you also have the prevailing wage documentation, you have the LCA, you have the LCA posting documentation, etc., etc. They might also choose to interview people at your office. They could interview the beneficiary, or they could interview other employees as well. They can ask the beneficiary about their physical work location, their hours of operation, hours that they work, their salary, their duties, the client that they work for, if indeed they're working for an outside company as a consultant, etc., etc. So this is all the tasks that the immigration officer will basically perform. In addition, so that we don't get flustered, I think it's a good idea that before the officer comes, the company should develop a protocol or a process, so that when the officer comes, it'll be very smooth. The unauthorized people are not talking on behalf of the company and giving wrong information, etc., etc., and also less anxiety, since you are prepared for an FTNS visit, because an FTNS visit is, let's face it, it's inevitable. If you're actually filing H1s at some point or the other, you will get such a visit. So before the visit, it's important to develop staff protocol for the site visits, appoint a point of contact, perform an internal audit of all your H&L employees, look at the job duties, work locations, salaries, make sure they're consistent with what's in the petition, make sure you're paying the prevailing wage, make sure your public access files that I just mentioned are up to date. And if possible, I think it would be prudent to run a mock site visit. So pretend that someone's an officer and someone is greeting them. What the person at the reception is supposed to ask the officer, they're supposed to ask for ID, and what should they do if the contact person is not available, or what should they do if that employee is not available. So these protocols you should have in place.
Yes.
Just to give you an example of some questions that could be asked by the officer, how many employees does your company have? How many of these current H1s are working remote? A lot of FTNS officers are now asking for, how many people are working remote and where they're working. Why do you need the employer? Can you provide a list of the job duties of the employer? What are the working hours? Does the employee maintain residence in one state or in more than one state? Who is the manager or supervisor of the employee, right? So work hours, address, who is the manager, job duties. These are some questions that they can ask. What is the salary? What's your current job title? So these are some of the basic questions. I'm just rushing through this because we've kind of discussed this last time, and I just
Yes.
wanted to do an overview of everything.
Yes.
So an example of what documents can be asked, I'm giving you a real life example of a recent case which I had. They asked for the following documents. In addition to all the questions that they asked for the following documents. They asked for an org chart in which they've asked to include the names, titles of each of the individuals. They've asked for a complete list of all full-time, part-time employees, including they wanted their full names, their date of birth, their immigration status, salary, and if they're working remote, that is place of work. So all this information they wanted. They also wanted copies of all the contracts that the company had between them and their current clients. They asked for driver's license of the employee. They asked for recent performance appraisals that were performed for the employee. They've asked for the 3 latest pay stubs. They've asked for the resume that was submitted by the employee when the employee was hired. So these are some of the typical documents, and they asked all these by email. They didn't actually come for a site visit because the officer was in a different state. So these are some of the documents that you can expect they will ask during an FTNS site visit. I think I've covered the presentation. We can go ahead and tackle some of the questions that we received.
Yes. So, Ms. Prashanthi Reddy garu, let's talk about, let's go from the first. Why does, these kind of site visits generally happen? Is there, so let's say that there was something wrong with the employer that, oh my God, the site visits were done, or it's just like a general routine that the USCIS is now performing so that the site visits are happening?
It could be either way. It could be either a random site visit, or it could be some kind of initiative that the USCIS has started simply to gather information. Or it could be something that triggered off the site visit, like maybe a consulate. The person went to the consulate, didn't do very well at the consulate, responded to some questions. There was maybe in an improper way, and there was some discrepancies in what the person said versus what was said in the documentation. That could result in a site visit also. So, as I said, it could be unannounced and random, or it could be something that they're looking for and they want to further. Sometimes the consulate also will ask the USCIS to perform site visits before they give a visa. So it could be many different reasons.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, does the USCIS give a notice that, okay, we are going to come to a site visit, or is there any, pre-site visit notice that people get?
Not really. The FTNS may contact the organization, that is the employer, by email or phone to request information or documents, and then might possibly follow that up with a site visit. But in some cases, the officer may just arrive at the work site unannounced, or they could arrive at the person's home if the person's home is the work site. So they usually go to the work site. So if the LCA says that the petitioner's office is the work site, then they could go there. Or if it's a remote location where a person is working from home, they can go to the workplace. They can go home to the person's home and ask to meet with them there and ask them questions, etc. And ask to see what their work site looks like, where they're working, what laptop they use, etc., etc. Or if they're working at a client site, they can actually go and visit them at a third-party site or at the client site as well.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, I'm pretty sure, when these sites visit are happening, a lot of them can get a little intimidated. And is there any possible way that they can request for their attorneys to be on site when this visit is happening?
For sure, you can request it, and the attorneys can be on site if they have a G28, if they have submitted a notice of appearance, which is G28. The only problem is that the attorney may not be able to get there on time, and it's very unlikely that the FTNS officer will come back for another visit. and because rescheduling a visit for them is also it takes up their resources and their time. So they may not agree to reschedule, but they might agree to have the attorney present, if not physically, but at least over the phone.
Yes.
So if the attorney is able to make it, well and good. Otherwise, I don't think it's a good idea to refuse the officer entry or to not answer his questions simply because the attorney is not there, because then you run the risk of the officer then writing a negative report.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, who exactly are these FDNS officers? Is there like a separate force or separate unit in the government that they work for? And also, is it a right thing to ask for their identification, or is it going to ruin the whole process over?
So as I was saying earlier, FDNS officers earlier used to be independent contractors that were hired by USCIS. But now USCIS is actually hiring employees, has employees as FDNS officers. So they are USCIS officers, basically FDNS officers. So when an FDNS officer appears at your company's premises, you should ask to see his or her identification or business card or whatever. Especially if you're concerned about the visitor's credentials. Also, you should make a copy of it, or you should ask for the card and keep it so that you have their contact information in case you need to reach them later. So very important to not only ask for identification, but also ask for a business card so you have a way of contacting that officer later.
Yes. Ms. Reddy, we have an FAQ. It says, my company has a policy of admitting government officials only when they have a sub Fiona, if I'm not wrong. Must we cooperate with the FDNS officer? This is the question. What is your take on this?
So if your company has that policy of admitting officials only if there's a subpoena, so basically a subpoena is an order from a court saying that you have to allow the officers in. I mean, that's up to you. You can decide what you want to do, but you have to remember that I strongly urge you to cooperate with the FDNS officers. When you're submitting a petition for immigration benefits, you're subjecting yourself to reasonable inquiries from the government. And regulations expressly allow the government to take testimony, to conduct investigation related to the petition before they grant a benefit, or even after they grant the benefit, to make sure there's no fraud in the system. So employers who file either whatever it might be, a non-immigrant or an immigrant petition on behalf of their employees, they authorize the release of any information from the records, right? So you have to be ready to give information if you're seeking a benefit. If you don't give that information, then it's possible that the officer will prepare a negative compliance report and will send it to USCIS, and then USCIS might send a notice of intent to deny the H-1B petition that has already been approved because they received this negative report from the FDNS officer. But that doesn't mean that the FDNS officer has free rein to do whatever they want or ask any kind of question or any kind of information. It obviously has to be related to the matter in hand. So if they have come for a particular person, then they should generally be asking for information related to that person.
Yes.
So I think what you need to do is weigh your company's interests before deciding not to respond. Because, as I said, a failure to cooperate could, jeopardize that specific petition.
Yes.
And also compromise the likelihood of the company getting approvals on future petitions as well. That's a problem because they can just send this report every time you file a H1, and it's happened in the past. They can just keep sending this report and say that, you are a fraudulent company, you don't exist, you don't have any employees, blah, blah, blah. And they'll keep sending that copy of the same compliance report whenever you file a H1, and to each one then you have to respond and give your response to say that you don't agree with the compliance report. So that's really very onerous to do that.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, let's say that the foreign employee is absent on that day, or let's say he's on a leave or on a vacation, and sadly or unfortunately has the FDNS during that time. Is that something to worry about?
Well, as long as you have proof that the employee is not there because he's on vacation, maybe you have an email from him saying, I won't be coming in today, or he's asked for medical leave, right, or some other authorized leave. So then it's possible that the officer may agree to reschedule the visit. And if you're able to provide proof that leave was actually granted and it's not just that the employee doesn't work for you, then it shouldn't have any negative consequences, even if the person is not there. So officer will decide whether they want to reschedule the visit, whether they want to talk to the beneficiary over the phone, or simply they might send an email and ask the beneficiary to answer a bunch of questions. So they'll decide what needs to be done.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, let's say that the foreign employee is stationed at a third party work site. So does the FDNS have the authority to go and conduct a site visit even there?
Yeah, so as I said, depending on wherever the work site is, the FDNS officer can come there. It could be your home, it could be your employer's address, or it could be the end client. So they conduct a site visit at the workplace of the beneficiary. So yeah, absolutely. If the workplace is the end client site, the employer should communicate with the end client beforehand, if possible, to ensure that the process is smooth, to ensure that they let them in, first of all, because sometimes some clients may not even let this person in because they don't know who the person is. And they don't know anything about an FDNS visit. So it's important to educate the clients as well with reference to the FDNS visit, and maybe educate them on what are the likely questions that the officer will ask. And make an audit also to make sure that, the job is the same and nothing has changed with reference to whatever job the client said the person was supposed to perform. So yeah, absolutely, they can come to the client site as well.
Yes. Ms. Reddy, let's say that the site visit is happening, and must a company representative always accompany during when the FDNS site visit is happening, and must they take notes? What are some things that a company representative should be doing during the site visit?
Absolutely, there should always be someone with the officer. The officer should not be allowed to roam around freely in your office. They should take notes of everything that the officer said, everything that the officer asked. Maybe they were interviewing the other employees. Sometimes an officer might say that they want to interview that particular employee in private. That is, unfortunately, they are allowed to do that. If the officer takes any photographs, you should ask the officer for copies of the photographs that they took. So yes, detailed notes with exactly what happened and all the transactions should be made. Somebody should be made responsible for taking those notes.
Yes. So because I live in India, Ms. Reddy, I don't really know a lot about this FDNS visit, but whenever you're talking about it, I'm only imagining income tax officers running into the officers and like making sure the whole,
it's something like that, because it's like an audit.
Yeah.
Maybe not as bad as an income tax raid, because then, they're allowed to pull out everything and look through everything. Here, they're not really allowed to. They're allowed to walk around.
Yeah.
They're allowed to take photographs, but they can't they can't go and touch anything that without your authorization.
Yes.
They can ask for documentation, and then you have to bring the documentation to them. The documentation asked should be reasonable. So a little better than a IRS visit, I think.
Yes. So how long does this take? So is it like an hour process or like a whole day process? What's the process time?
So usually offices will cater about an hour to 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours for the process. Sometimes they're very quick. They just have, or maybe they have many visits, or they just need to make sure that your office exists. So they might take as less as 10-15 minutes just to see the office and take some quick pictures. But usually I think it's a few hours, 1 or 2 hours. Sometimes if things are not going well, it could be much longer if they find information that there are discrepancies in the documentation. They can dig deep and ask for more and more documentation. Then takes time to make photocopies of everything and give it to them. So sometimes it can even take half a day, or like a few hours as well.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, finally, just like a round up, can we just talk about some important documents that people should keep ready? Let's say, is this also, this is just a question that I had. Will these people just go directly talk to the main head or the manager of the company, or will they just randomly go and talk to, people around them and, ask random questions to get the confirmation or anything?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Usually they will first go obviously to a receptionist. So hopefully your company has a receptionist. The receptionist will ask for a visiting card or proof of identity. And then, as I said, you have to prepare for an FDNS visit in advance. So there should be a designated point of contact, either HR or the owner. If the HR or owner is not there, then you should notify them so if they can come while the officer waits. If they are not in the country or not in the city, then you have to inform the officer that the person in charge is not there and nobody else can answer their questions. Because really, if you get someone else to answer questions when they don't know anything about the company, then that will be a disaster. Generally, the officer should ask questions of the point of contact and maybe if there are employees working there, but not HR staff, right? So not marketing HR staff. For example, if it's an IT company, and if there are other people who have filed H1s as well, they could broaden the investigation to more than one person on a H1. But they say there's a US citizen, they cannot ask any questions of the US citizen because they have no business doing that, because that US citizen is not under investigation and cannot be. So it could be if there are other H1B employees, they can ask them as well what they do and etc. But otherwise, anything else beyond that, you have to just ask the officer to come back or just apologize that the point of contact is not there, and hopefully, if the officer is convinced of the validity of your request, they won't send a negative report. They'll just most probably follow up with a phone call or an email. They'll give their card and ask, the point of contact to call them when they're available.
Yes. Great. Thank you again, Ms. Prashanthi Reddy, for tuning on to the show. We covered a very important topic. It was lovely talking to you. Thank you to the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.
Thanks, Shivani. Take care.